Section 135 of the Companies Act 2013 mandates the companies with turnover more than 1000 crore, net worth more than 500 crores and net profit more than 5 crores to spend minimum 2% of their net profit, average net profit of the last 3 years as corporate social responsibilities. Also, Schedule 7th of this particular act prescribes various activities which will be called as corporate social responsibility activities. We call it as CSR activities. In the last 1 decade, corporate social responsibility has become one of the biggest pillars of corporate governance in our particular country. India is one of the first countries in the world to come up with corporate social responsibility as a legislation in the country and making it mandatory and making it as an obligation for the companies to spend money on corporate social responsibility. But why CSR in so much news? Because recently in the last 1 year, we have seen a 16% increase in corporate social responsibility expenditure by the companies in our country. So in the financial year 2022-2023, the listed companies in our country spent around 15,500 crores as corporate social responsibility. And in the very next year, 2023-2024, listed companies in our country spent around 17,900 plus crores in corporate social responsibility in our country, which means a 16% rise in one single year in corporate social responsibility expenditure in our country, which is massive and which is huge. While this increase in CSR expenditure in our country is laudable, but one thing which is very important for us to understand is that what is actually this CSR initiative as a legislation in our country? What are the key provisions of CSR in our country? What are the key issues and what are the key suggestible reforms in relation to whole CSR network as a corporate governance in our country? All these things are very integral and important for us to understand and to know. So in today's session, we'll be trying to cover corporate social responsibility in India. Hello, my name is Preetpal Singh and you are watching Perspective. See, let's take a moment and let's talk about the philosophy behind this corporate social responsibility in our country and in the world as well. You must have heard of one principle by Mahatma Gandhi ji, that is trusteeship principle, where Mahatma Gandhi ji said that wealthy people, the wealth which they are having is not actually their own wealth. It is basically the trust which people have endowed upon the wealthy people, which means wealthy people are the trustees of the trust which has been formed, which is their wealth, which is really to ensure welfare of the wider public. Which means, simply speaking, wealthy people should use their wealth, should use their means, should use their resources for the benefit of the larger population, for the benefit of the larger public, rather than their own greedy, selfish interest. That is what the trusteeship model and principle of Mahatma Gandhi ji talked about. Now, keeping in mind this trusteeship principle, now let us move towards corporatization. Let us move towards capitalism debate, where corporate entities or companies, their sole motive is to earn profit. See, we all must have heard multiple times on different forums that the role of the government is to ensure social welfare and the role of private sector, that is the companies, is to maximize their profits. This is a role which they have divided amongst themselves very clearly. But what if I say that it is companies' role as well to ensure social welfare? What if I say that, and this philosophy has been there since long and has been propagated by different quarters, especially the NGOs and social activists in different parts of the country and different parts of the world, that it is not just the responsibility of the government to ensure social welfare, it is also the responsibility of the companies to ensure social welfare. Keeping in line with that, Indian government also came up with this corporate social responsibility framework, not all of a sudden. It came a decade back only in form of different names, different measures, different policies, and eventually it culminated into a corporate social responsibility CSR mandation and obligation in the Companies Act of 2013. Now, when we talk about companies' responsibility to ensure social welfare, we have to look at it in a very broad perspective, broad light. Because the people who propagate companies' social responsibility, they say that the companies, the private entities, their main aim is to earn profit. But they are earning profit in a place which is society. They are earning profit using the resources of the society. They are earning profit using the people, using the larger public, and which is why they are using the resources of the society. They are eventually dependent depend on society for each and everything which they do, why not they should be contributing something to the society as well? Because if they're just earning profit, few select individuals, they're earning profit, not contributing anything to the society, that would be very bad for the societal circle. And eventually it will lead to the societal downturn. Which is why many propagators say that companies needs to contribute certain minimum amount of whatever profit they earn towards a social responsibility, whether it be towards education, sanitation, healthcare, or environment, or any sort of activities, just that the companies should be helping societies in which they are existing, in which they are prospering. If that is not done, eventually what is the purpose of the companies earning profit? Rather than just helping a select few, why shouldn't the company help the people at large? And through this, the concept of corporate social responsibility emanates. Now, this is the motive and the philosophy behind the corporate social responsibility. But if you actually see in implementation, CSR has now just become a gimmick. Rather than people actually wanting to invest in CSR, it has become a legal obligation. It has become a legal trick through which corporate entities, through which companies, they have to siphon off some of their money to some activities which most of the times usually is greenwashing. Now, what is greenwashing? We'll be understanding later, but most of these activities are actually not helping the society at large. And even if they are helping society at large, it is being done just to fulfill that legal measure, legal obligation, and not because the companies themselves realize, and not because the culture of the country has developed in a way that it is their responsibility to do anything for the society. They are just doing it to avoid penalties, they're just doing it to avoid fines and jail imprisonment. Now let us look at some top CSR spenders in our country who spend the most in CSR activities. Definitely the top of the list is HDFC Bank, spending more than 945 crores. Then second it is Reliance Industries, spending more than 900 crores in CSR activities. Then there is Tata Consultancy Services, TCS. Then there is ONGC, spending more than 600 crores. Then Tata Steel, spending more than 580 crores, then ICICI Bank spending more than 500 crores, then IOC, that is Indian Oil Corporation, spending more than 450 crores, then there is Infosys, ITC and Power Grid Corporation of India. So these are the top CSR spenders in our country on the basis of amount which they spend. And if you look at the sectors, two prominent sectors had the most priority under the corporate social responsibility. One, it's education. More than 1100 crores has been spent on education sector alone. And second is healthcare. More than 720 crores have been spent on healthcare sector alone. So these two sectors are the most predominant. After that, there is environment, sustainability. For defense personnel, there are certain initiatives and so on. But one thing to note here is that expenditure on environmental sustainability has seen a greater increase of more than 54% than the last year, which means and which shows greater environmental consciousness amongst the companies. But there's a bad news to it as well. Like some areas of slum development, rural development, and armed forces veterans welfare has seen a significant decline. Some of 70%, some of 50%, 59%, 52%, different percentage decline in these three areas. Slum development, rural development, and armed forces veterans welfare, it has seen a sharp decline. And if you look at the corporate compliance, around 98% of the companies, they complied with the CSR criteria. And also around 49% of the companies, they exceeded their mandated spending, which reflects a proactive approach by the companies as well to ensure that corporate social responsibility is undertaken not just as a legal measure, but as a measure to do something meaningful and good in the society as well. Now, the overall governance of the CSR has also improved, and it is mandated that the companies who are spending more than 50 lakhs under the CSR need to have a CSR committee in place, having 3 directors. Amongst them, 1 director should be an independent director, which is again very good to ensure that the CSR money which they are spending, the CSR committee is basically ensuring that the money is spent in a well-directioned way and is not used for inefficient products, not used for inefficient services or inefficient program. Now, one very important thing for us to know is that what are the CSR activities which are under the Schedule 7 of this Act. And while we understand what are the CSR activities, we'll be able to understand the significance of corporate social responsibility as well. Now, one amongst them is eradication of hunger and poverty. And that is one activity which is a part of CSR activity. Now, several rural development programs, several poverty reduction programs by different companies are in place, which definitely helps in a reduction of the poverty levels, helps in reduction of the hunger levels, and also helps in education, healthcare, and overall welfare of the society at large. So for instance, around 12,300 crores was alone spent on rural development, directly impacting the poverty-stricken people and poverty-stricken economies. That is first part. Now, second very important part is improvement in public healthcare and expenditure in healthcare by these companies. Now, that is another component which is a part of CSR activities. So, during COVID-19 pandemic, we saw companies like Reliance, Infosys, and several other pharmaceutical companies as well investing and putting their money in pharmaceuticals, putting their money in oxygen plants and vaccination drives in order to ensure that the country gets benefited at large. So these initiatives taken by these private corporations help definitely in strengthening the healthcare infrastructure in the country. And very recently, the sector which has seen a uplifted growth, that is environmental sustainability and climate action. Now this particular sector embarks a very large amount, thousands of crores of money under the CSR initiative to ensure that sustainability is ensured, and also to ensure that efforts like afforestation, water conservation, solar power plants, clean energy projects are in place, which helps the life of the public. Now, for example, ITC Limited is having an initiative known as Mission Sunhera Kal, which is again empowered towards water conservation, benefiting millions of people in water-stressed areas in our country. So this is one of the initiatives of such kind. And another pillar which we already know about is education, skill development, human resource development. That is a very integral part of the corporate social responsibility. And HCL Technologies in the year 2023 has launched a digital literacy campaign, digital literacy program to empower the youths in our country, to empower the rural youth and help them get better employment opportunities by providing them skills, by providing them skill development. So this is another pillar of corporate social responsibility. Now, one more important pillar is enhancement of community welfare and enhancement of community infrastructure, whether it be roads, whether it be community centers, whether it be sanitation facilities, water facilities for the public, and so on. This is another integral part. Like Vedanta CSR efforts, Vedanta as a company is having a CSR initiative known as Swasth Gaon Abhiyan, where end-to-end healthcare facilities are provided across 1,000 villages in our country, improving healthcare outcomes and reduction of healthcare risks in these particular areas. And this is another pillar of CSR initiative in our country. Now, other than this, areas like gender equality, sports, national heritage, conservation of the national heritage, support of armed forces, contribution to certain government funds like PM National Relief Fund, PM Cares Fund, and other socio-economic development initiatives by the government. In all these places, if a company invests, that would be considered as a part of corporate social responsibility. And other than that, slum area development or a disaster management. In these spheres as well, expenditure done by the companies would be considered as a part of CSR. But the real question is that in which areas if the companies would invest, that would not be treated as a part of corporate social responsibility. That is something which is very important for us to understand. So several activities which benefit only the employees and their families, that would not be treated as a CSR activity. Let's say a vacation for the employees or vacation for employees' families or sponsoring education of employees' families, that is not considered as a part of CSR because it is directly impacting and benefiting the employee. Also, one-off events like a marathon or a TV program or an advertisement or one-time contribution, that will not be considered as a part of CSR activity because CSR should be an ongoing service, not a one-off event. Also, statutory obligations, that means obligations which the company has to make under a particular law, under a particular statute or a regulation like a labor law or several other laws, that statutory obligation won't be a part of the CSR. And fourth important thing is political contributions. If the companies make political contributions, funding to any of the political parties directly or indirectly, it won't be considered as a part of CSR expenditure. That is very integral. And last but not the least, if the company does any expenditure in the course of the business activity which is going on, that is activities undertaken by the company in the course of normal business operations, are not regarded as CSR activities, and the expenditure therein is not regarded as CSR expenditure. But all the other sectors which I discussed, whether it be healthcare, whether it be education, sanitation, rural development, slum development, armed forces welfare, veterans welfare, or whether it be community development or any other spheres, environment, any other sphere where the corporate social responsibility is there as a part of the 7th schedule, would be considered as a CSR expenditure and would be part of that limit of minimum 2% of net profit, of the average net profit of the last 3 years, should be spent on these CSR activities. This expenditure on these areas would be counted as a part of it. Now, one thing which we can very clearly specify by now is that expenditure done on all these sectors by the companies is definitely going to boost national development, is definitely going to bring economic growth, is going to bring economic development. So there is no doubt about it that CSR, companies, corporate social responsibility, is helpful for the economy, for the society, and for the political arena as well. There is no questions, no doubt about it. But now what we need to discuss is what are certain constraints and challenges in the CSR framework in our country, which definitely builds a challenge for the corporate governance in our particular country. See, the biggest challenge in CSR guideline is that still most of the CSR in our country is in grey area. That means there are guidelines, there are regulations, there are legislations, but still elaborate rules of how a CSR should be functioned and how a CSR activity should be undertaken and impact analysis of those activities, that is not very robustly written down and that is not robustly legislated, which is why it usually comes under the grey area. And as you would know, that if anything comes under the grey area, there can be potential misuse of any such provision and the money can be siphoned off. And that is one biggest loophole in corporate social responsibility mechanism and framework in our country, which means legislation needs to be more elaborate, they need to be more guideline oriented, and more legislation, elaborate legislation needs to be there to show the companies the path of corporate social responsibility and not just tell them that you have to do this, but also tell them how it needs to be done and what could be the impact it generates. And eventually monitoring of the CSR initiative should be made more robust. Not just the numbers needs to be monitored, but the impact analysis, the qualitative impact of the initiative taken by the company needs to be well monitored and the company needs to be made accountable for it. So which means one, absence of clear CSR guidelines. That is one very big problem. Now, second biggest problem I will say is of regional disparity. That is some states of Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, Karnataka, Maharashtra, some of these states are the ones who have maximum CSR expenditure. And in these states only, education and healthcare sector initiatives are being sponsored by these companies. But what about other states, especially the northeastern region, or what about Jammu and Kashmir, or what about other states in our country where companies are not present in that great way? In those areas, CSR expenditure is not done at all, which is why regional disparity exists in relation to CSR expenditure and its impact and its outcome. This is second biggest challenge in relation to CSR in our country. So first is policy gap, second is regional disparity, third pillar is also very important, that is sectoral disparity. As I told you in the initial part of the lecture as well, that education and healthcare sector, they see most of the CSR expenditure by these companies. But what about other sectors, especially environment? Now companies have started putting more money into environment. But what about again other sectors? Like slum area development, contribution to government funds or national heritage, culture, gender equality, contribution towards vulnerable groups, research and development, disaster management, all these sectors usually are neglected. So expenditure on these sectors is usually less as compared to expenditure on healthcare and education. Which is why alongside regional disparity, there is sectoral disparity on the CSR expenditure as well, which needs not to be overlooked and which should be looked at, which we should pay attention to and needs to be remedied. And at least we need to ensure that most of the funds which are there for CSR activities, it should be in those sectors which impact the people's lives directly. Education and healthcare is definitely the one, but other sectors also shouldn't be neglected at all. And the fourth and the most important issue and the last issue which we are going to discuss is that of greenwashing. Now, I've used this term before as well. Greenwashing simply means that sometimes companies view CSR as just a statutory obligation and they engage multiple times in superfluous activities which are not having any direct measurable impact. but is just fulfilling that number criteria of CSR. That means the amount of CSR is being fulfilled, but measurable impact is not at all there. Sometimes they might try to provide misleading information, might try to impact their stakeholders or the general public in any particular way, and this misleading CSR expenditure, which is in activities having no measurable impact, is what we call as greenwashing. Now, the whole debate around corporate social responsibility in any of the nation and in the whole world points to two specific ideologies. One ideology is a stakeholder ideology, and another ideology is a shareholder ideology. Now let's talk about the shareholder ideology first. Shareholder ideology says that if they are investing, shareholders are investing money in the company, the aim of the company should be to ensure maximization of wealth of the shareholders of the company and not engage in any activity which would jeopardize and not engage in any activity which would be bad for the shareholders and not help shareholders to gain wealth, which is shareholders maximization of wealth theory, which says that entire focus of the company should be to maximize wealth of the shareholders who have invested money in the company. That is one. Another set of ideology is stakeholder ideology, which says that the company is having a lot of stakeholders as well, and shareholders are one of the stakeholders. And other than that, the environment, the business environment, the public at large, the suppliers, the customers, all the other people are the stakeholders of the company. And the company should not only work for the maximization of wealth of the shareholders, but should also work for the welfare of the stakeholders as well. And that is where principally the motive and the conception of corporate social responsibility came from. And what we see right now is that alongside stakeholder being at the forefront for the companies are just fulfilling the numerical requirement of corporate social responsibility and not the measurable impact requirement. And measurable impact, because it's a qualitative thing, it is very difficult to monitor, it is very difficult to make the companies accountable for it. But the way forward for the next generation should be to ensure adding this qualitative element to the corporate social responsibility as well, and to ensure that the overall impact of the CSR expenditure done by the companies, whether it be 900 crores, 500 crores, 400 crores, whatever the amount might be, the companies must ensure that the money which they spend is having a measurable impact to the lives of the public and makes the lives of the public better off. Now, what are your opinions surrounding the CSR framework and the guidelines in our country and around the corporate governance guidelines in our country? Do let me know in the comment section. All the very best and have a beautiful day. Thank you.